Hello and welcome to part 5 of our read aloud of Basketball Brother by Bo Rush. When we left off, Leo is feeling better. His leg is back to even more than full strength from what it was before his accident. He found out that Mrs. Bottle is actually Natalie's mother. He just somehow hadn't made that connection in the weeks that he's been in Paris, Indiana. And he has been invited to join her rec league team, the Explorers. He's never played on a basketball team before, so he's super excited about that. But he's realizing, as one of the subs, he doesn't really get an opportunity to play much offense, and he's not sure how he's going to become a starter if the coach never really sees how good he is. As it turned out, Mr. Foote had a policy to make sure all the kids on the team got to play in every game. So in the very next game, with 2 minutes remaining, and the Explorers already trailing the Rockets 62-30, me and the other subs raced onto the floor. I was playing in a real basketball game for the first time in my life. I knew it was garbage time and that we weren't going to be able to make a comeback by that much, but that didn't bother me. It felt like Game 7 of the NBA Finals to me. I had woken up extra early that morning. I wanted to have enough time to do my leg exercises twice so that I'd be at my strongest for the game. Natalie and I skipped our morning recess reading practice so we could talk strategy, just in case Mr. Foote sent me in to play with the starters. And when Mr. Foote handed me my Explorers shirt before the game, I was so thrilled, I didn't know what to say. Wow, this is just... Thanks, Coach. I held the shirt up and stared at it in amazement. Everything about it. The lettering that spelled Explorers, the red trim, the number 33, especially the number 33, was awesome. Just put it on, Leo, said Mr. Foote. The game starts in 5 minutes. My heart was beating a mile a minute as I watched my teammate Hayden dribble the ball up the court. I noticed that the kid guarding me was also watching Hayden, so I cut toward the basket and waved my arms frantically. I was wide open. But Hayden didn't see me. He just kept dribbling the basketball until he accidentally dribbled it off his foot. The Rocket defender scooped up the ball and went in for an uncontested layup. Hayden brought the ball up court again. This time, when I took a quick step toward the basket, the kid guarding me was ready. He ran back toward the basket, but I suddenly stopped and sped to the free throw line. No one was guarding me again. But Hayden threw a wild cross-court pass to Alex. The ball sailed 10 feet over his head into the empty bleachers. I raced back to play defense, but no one else did. I couldn't guard all 5 Rockets players, so I went for the kid who had the ball. He tossed it to another kid under the basket. I pivoted and leapt up to try to block his shot. I blocked it, but I also knocked the kid to the floor, and the ref's whistle blew. The kid I fouled made the second of 2 free throws. I grabbed the basketball to make the inbounds pass to someone besides Hayden. But before I could find an open teammate, the buzzer sounded and the game was over. That night, lying in bed, I took out a notebook and on the first page wrote down the final score, 65-30. Then I wrote down my personal stats. 0 shots, 0 points, 0 assists, 0 rebounds, 1 personal foul. I smiled and closed the notebook. It felt pretty good to have my very first foul in a real game. I don't know exactly when I started going over to Natalie's house every day after school. She and I would eat some kind of snack in the kitchen, then do our homework. It was okay with my mom because she wasn't at home anyway. She'd still be at work. And she knew Mrs. Bottle was a teacher, so you could probably trust her. Of course, Mrs. Bottle wasn't ever at their house right after school. She was always across the street grading papers and stuff in her classroom. And Mr. Bottle wasn't there either because he was working, well, wherever it was that he worked. And sometimes Natalie wasn't even there. She had student council meetings and chess club and a bunch of other things going on all the time. The first time that happened, it was all Natalie's idea. You know where we hide the key, Leo? Natalie winked. You sure it's okay? Of course. You're like my brother, Leo. My basketball brother. She held out her fist to me. I bumped her fist with mine. And you're like my basketball sister, Nat. I smiled. I'd never had a sister before. But whether Natalie was there or not, I'd always end up in the den reading to Shakespeare. At first it was because I knew that was the only way to keep him from biting my face off. But after a while, I kind of forgot all about how mean that dog used to be. When he'd see me, his tail would start wagging like mad, and it kind of looked like he was smiling when I'd pet him. I never thought I'd want to spend any time with a dog, much less read a book to one. But I really liked reading to Shakespeare. I liked reading to him better than to Natalie because he was a better listener. and he never stopped me to correct something I said that was wrong. I don't know how many basketball books I read to Shakespeare, but I'm pretty sure I read every one there is. The first one took a while to finish, but the ones after that went faster and faster. I knew I was getting to be a better reader because they weren't even first grade books either. Not even second grade or third. And then an amazing thing happened. A thing that was even more amazing than me liking a dog. I raised my hand in class to read out loud. It was one of those word problems in math class. Since I'm already pretty good at math, I figured I had an advantage. Mrs. Bottle was probably surprised when she asked for a volunteer to read and saw my hand go up. But like most teachers, she did a good job of hiding it. Yes, Leo? She probably figured I was just raising my hand to go to the bathroom or something. Yes, Leo? I could see all the kids in the class turning to look at me. Ethan Crumb and Parker Bone exchanged smiles, waiting to see what dumb thing I was going to do. My heart was beating a mile a minute. I knew this was my last chance to back out. Suddenly I blurted out, I can read the problem. I'm pretty sure I saw Natalie's mouth drop open. The other kids looked even more intently at me. I knew they all knew I couldn't read. Ethan and Parker had made sure everyone in the school knew that. I looked down at the math book and tried to focus my eyes, but all that blood rushing to my head must have made it hard to see the words. I looked up at Mrs. Bottle to see if she was going to help, but she just stood there with a soft smile on her face, waiting patiently for me to begin. I looked around at all the faces and wondered why I had been stupid enough to raise my hand. The classroom was completely quiet, quieter than any classroom I'd ever heard. The only sound echoing in my ears was my pounding heartbeat. So I started to read. A train leaves Centerville at 4:30 p.m. and travels 50 miles per hour. If Rosewood is 175 miles away, when will the train arrive there? I read the whole problem, the whole word problem without messing up once. I looked over and saw Natalie grinning. Thank you, Leo. Mrs. Bottle kept acting like everything was normal. All the kids in class suddenly lost interest in me. They turned back to their books and tried to figure out the answer to the train question. I knew the answer was 8 o'clock, but I didn't raise my hand. I was feeling so good about reading that word problem, I didn't want to let go of the feeling. Reading every day to Shakespeare was the second best thing about living in Paris. The best thing was playing basketball, of course, with the explorers at the rec center and every day on the playground at lunch recess. At school, Parker and Ethan always chose the teams. They called themselves the All-Stars, and the other 5th grade team was the Hoosiers. For some reason, Hoosiers is a real popular name in Indiana, even though no one I've asked really knows what it means. Natalie and I never got picked to play on the 5th grade court. Ethan and Parker made it clear they weren't going to let anyone bad enough to be on the Explorers ruin their game. So Natalie and I always teamed up with the other 5th grade rejects and played with the 4th graders. It wasn't much of a challenge because none of those little kids could guard Natalie. She would dribble past them like they weren't even there. And I could jump higher than anyone. I grabbed pretty much every rebound and blocked most of the 4th graders' shots. Even though it was fun beating the 4th graders every day, I was getting annoyed that we couldn't even play with our own class. It's not fair that Parker and Ethan get to decide who plays, I complained to Natalie. Well, they decide because they're the best players in 5th grade, Natalie replied. Yeah, well, we're better than those two. Way better. Natalie just laughed at me. Are you serious? Ethan's the best shooter in school, Leo. And Parker's the only 5th grader in Paris history to touch the rim. Just watch them. We looked over at the 5th grade court. Parker snared a rebound with one huge hand and rifled it down court to Ethan, who drained a 25-foot three-pointer. Whoa. Did you see that, Nat? Natalie laughed again. Yeah, but we're better, remember? Way better. The Explorers' next 2 games were blowouts just like the others. We lost to the Cruisers 55-18 and to the Flash 47-24. In both contests, the other subs and I played the final 2 minutes of the 4th quarter, and I didn't touch the ball in either game. Despite the crushing defeats and my lack of playing time, it was still exciting to wear a real basketball uniform and sit on the bench and cheer on my teammates. But things got a lot more exciting at the Explorers' final practice of the season. Mr. Foote whistled for us to gather around him at mid-court. All right, last practice, guys. Let's make it a good one. Oh, before I forget, I just found out that Noah has strep throat, so Leo, you're starting tomorrow against the High Flyers. I nodded, unable to speak because my heart had somehow jumped up into my throat. Natalie slapped me on the back. "Woohoo, let's go, Leo!" I tried to respond, but nothing in my body was working. "Offense, run the half court," ordered Mr. Foote. The other kids drifted to their places, but I still couldn't move. It was like I was frozen. Natalie suddenly gave me a shove and my legs shot forward. "The High Flyers are undefeated," Natalie said to me. "That's Parker and Ethan's team." "It is?" "Yeah. But remember." I know. We're better." As Natalie dribbled the ball above the circle, I cut to the free throw line. She immediately threw a perfect bounce pass to me. I caught it and saw her streak toward the basket. I dished it back to her and turned to go for the rebound in case she missed the shot. But instead of actually shooting it, Natalie just floated the ball up in front of the basket. I leapt up, grabbed it, and laid it in off the glass. The other players just stood there with their mouths open. Even Mr. Foote was speechless. Natalie grinned at me. "See? Way better." I loved my Explorer shirt so much that I wore it every day to school underneath my regular shirt. The feel of it against my skin made it seem like I was a real basketball star. And not just some bench warmer on, well, pretty much the worst team in the history of youth basketball. But something told me not to wear number 33 to school the day of the High Flyers game. I wanted to save up all the magic I felt every time I slipped it on over my head. I needed all of its power when I ran out onto the court to face the High Flyers. Of course, Ethan and Parker made jokes all day at school about how the High Flyers were going to destroy us. "Should we even let them score tonight, Parker?" Ethan smirked. "Nah, it'll be fun to win the first 100-0 game ever." "Yeah, their parents will be so embarrassed they'll pretend they don't even know them." "Yeah, and the Paris News will put our picture on the front page, undefeated champs." Natalie and I tried to ignore them, but it's kind of hard when your blood is boiling. Their teasing didn't stop until the final bell rang at 3:15. "See you at your funeral," Ethan called to us as he and Parker grabbed their backpacks. As we watched them leave, Natalie muttered under her breath, "Jerks." "Just forget them, Nat. They're just trying to trick us, to beat us before the game even begins. It's simple psychology." Natalie picked up her backpack, then cocked her head to one side and looked at me quizzically. "And how do you know about psychology?" I shrugged and pulled a thick book from my backpack. I read about it. For the last few days, I'd been reading a book I'd seen on a shelf in the bottle's den. It was about sports, but not a story about a team that wins the championship or some star player who does something stupid and gets kicked off the team right before the big game. It was about sports psychology, which I think basically means having a winning attitude. That book has lots of giant words that I had to guess at, but what I did understand was real interesting. The main thing was how important it is to stay focused on what you're doing when you're playing a sport. You start messing up if you spend too much time thinking about the other team or the people watching you in the stands or on TV. That's what Ethan and Parker were trying to get us to do. It's pretty simple, I explained to Natalie as she unlocked the back door. Shakespeare barked happily and jumped up on us as we walked into the kitchen. Natalie buried her face in Shakespeare's thick neck fur. Although I was getting pretty comfortable around him, I wasn't quite ready to do that. So I just leaned down and scratched him behind his ear. "Well, then that means, deep down," Natalie suddenly sneezed, "Parker and Ethan must be worried about playing us, right, Shakespeare?" She buried her face in his fur again. "You really think so?" I asked hopefully. "No, I think they just enjoy making fun of other kids." Natalie sneezed again. "You okay?" "I'm fine." But she sneezed again. I really wanted to read a bunch more of that psychology book to Shakespeare, but I had to cut short my visit. "Hey, Nat, I've got to go." "Already? We just got here." "I have something I need to do at home." The last thing I heard as I went out the door was the sound of Natalie sneezing again. I opened the trunk where Mom kept all our special stuff. I reached in and took out the photo album. I flipped quickly to the picture I was looking for. It was the old photo of my dad holding the basketball. I studied the picture closely. Dad was wearing his high school uniform and standing with the ball under his arm. He looked so strong and happy, like he felt at home there in the gym. Then my eyes suddenly grew large. My dad was wearing number 33. The same number as me! I couldn't believe I hadn't noticed that before. I ripped off my t-shirt as I ran to my room. Mom had washed my Explorer shirt and I found it hanging in the closet. I took it in my hands and traced the 33 with my fingertip. Then I pulled the shirt on over my head and grabbed my basketball. I tucked the ball under my arm and stood before the mirror. Yes! I looked just like my dad. And that's when it hit me. I was my dad. No, wait a second. No, like he was me. My dad was alive in me. A powerful surge shot through my body. A surge of strength like nothing I'd ever felt before. If I had jumped up at that moment, I'm pretty sure my head would have smashed right through the ceiling. We're going to stop there before we reach the climactic battle between the poor explorers who have been blown out pretty much every game they've ever played and their match against Parker and Ethan and the undefeated High Flyers. If you want to see how things go, you'll have to join us for part 6 of Basketball Brother.